This week's Torah portion is the fifth Torah portion of the book of Genesis, Chaya Sarah. And that means the life of Sarah. But what we read about in this week's Torah portion is the death of Sarah. Sarah, our foremother, Sarah married to Abraham. This week's Torah portion begins with learning about the life of Sarah and about the death of Sarah. Sarah's lifetime was 100 years, 20 years, and 70 years. The years of Sarah's life. That's the first sentence of this week's Torah portion. Last week, we read about the birth of Rebecca. This week, we learn about the death of Sarah. And from this, we learn a concept that as the sun sets, the sun rises. As the sun rises, the sun sets. We learn about the death of a tzaddikus, of a righteous person, of a holy person. But before she dies, we learn about the birth of another righteous person who on some level, in some way, will continue her legacy, will continue her work in the world. Rebecca, when she enters into the tent of Sarah, our foremother, when Sarah dies, various holy things that happened in the tent disappeared. There was challah that she made that stayed fresh from one week to the other. The candles that she lit stay lit. The clouds of glory stayed over her tent. And when she died, those things went away. And when Rebecca, when she marries Sarah's son and she goes into the same tent, these things come back. So this idea of when the sun sets, there's a sun rising. There's there's an energy, there's a person in the world that will continue the legacy of the person who died. I want to speak about legacy. I want to speak about how to live our lives. So when we read about the death of Sarah Imenu, our foremother, we're learning about how to live our lives. So it says that she lived 100 years, 20 years, and 7 years. So this teaches us many things, and many of the commentators speak about that when she was 20, she was like she was 7. When she was 100, it was like she was 20, meaning that she took the simple, faithful, trustful, energetic 7-year-old that she was and took that into her 20-year-old self. So when she was 20 and she was a young adult and she was optimistic and independent and zealous and idealistic and changing the world with her husband Abraham, she was also like a 7-year-old. And when she became a wise old lady at 100, she was also taking with her and building upon what she was like when she was 20, what she was like when she was 70. So she's building on all these time frames of her life and using them to become this amazing person who is putting holiness into the world and creating the beginning of the Jewish people. She and Abraham are the beginning of the Jewish people. And so when we learn about her life and we learn about how she lived her life with passion and with vigor and with zealousness and with and idealism and a connection to God, and she's all the time connecting herself to God, she's bringing life into the world. So when she dies, she doesn't die. She continues on with this imprint that she's put into the world. Her legacy is her good deeds. Her legacy are her children, Isaac, and from him the Jewish people descend. But even without having biological descendants, she had many followers. She had many people whose lives she affected. Rabbi Sacks is quoted as saying that we achieve immortality by engraving our values on the hearts of others, and they on theirs, so that our ancestors live on in us and we in others, in our children, in our students, in our friends, in our spouses, that we make an imprint, but we are imprinted upon by those who came before us. And that's the chain. We're part of a chain. And Sarah, when she dies, she is building her whole life. She's taking her 7-year-old self and her 20-year-old self into our 100-year-old self and being all of this all the time. Every single moment was lived fully, if that's possible. Sounds like she was able to achieve that. And she brought God into it, bring life into it. So in the way she lived, even in death, she continues to live on. They say the children or the students or the people are impacted by others. We are the feet. We are the ones walking in the world on the path that the previous people paved for us, that they opened up a path for us, and we continue to walk on that path. And in our Jewish tradition, we have many ways to remember the people that came before us. We have yard sites, the 1-year anniversary when somebody died. We have Yiska that we say at certain times in the year to remember people, to be inspired to people. We go visit the grave sites of people, and we think about the people that came before us, and we continue to be inspired by them and continue to walk in their ways. Abraham says in this week's Torah portion, he eulogizes his wife and then he cries, then he bewails her. He doesn't cry first and then eulogize. He eulogizes her and then he cries, meaning that he was so involved in his life work with Sarah at his side that he didn't recognize, perhaps, say some of our commentators, who Sarah was in his life. And only when she died and she was physically gone and he starts to eulogize does he realize what he had. He didn't recognize it perhaps so fully when she was alive, and now he's eulogizing it and then he cries. So the order is, in the Torah it says that he eulogizes her and then he cries. Later in this week's Torah portion, we read about Rebekah becoming the wife of Isaac. And it says that Isaac married her and then he loved her, versus the other way around. It's not loving and then marrying. He marries her, makes a commitment to her. He commits himself to this partnership with Rebekah, and then he loves her. And I think the message is that the people in our lives, do we recognize them? Do we understand who they are? Are we grateful for these people in our lives? So when Abraham recognizes who Sarah was, he then cries. And when Isaac, through the years of his partnership with Rebekah, realizes who she is, over the years he comes to love her more and more and more and more. And I think that's something for us to understand, that we love people maybe instantly when we meet them. Oh, I love you, I love you. But the more time we spend with people, and when we engage in projects together or partnerships together, or we build something together, whether it's a spouse or a business partner or a friend or whatever it is that we do, when partnerships with people and we in relationship to people over the course of time and giving to people, we come to love them more and more. And we love them so much more 20, 30, 40, 50 years down the road than we did when we first met them. So the idea that when we learn that Isaac, he marries her and then he loves her, is teaching us that through the act of giving, through the act of partnership, we come to love people. So going back to the life of Sarah and the death of Sarah, and Abraham eulogizing her and then crying for her, and then it says he gets up, that he takes the trauma of her loss, of the loss of her, and then he gets up and he keeps moving. And that's spoken about in many different places as a way for us to live. That yes, we have setbacks, and yes, we have things that we're sad about, but we have to get up and keep going. We have to move ahead. And the next thing that he does is he goes to Ephron to buy the cave of Machpelah. So he knows already that the cave of Machpelah is the burial place of Adam and Eve, that Adam and Eve are buried in this cave, and that it has the gates. Apparently there's the gates to the Garden of Eden. The gates to heaven are in this cave. And he wants to buy this cave. And he goes to Ephron, who owns the cave and the land around the cave, and he buys it from him. And he buys it for a huge amount of money at the time. And it points us and it shows us what we value. Ephron valued money. He said, give me a lot of money and I'll be happy. I'll feel like I don't really value that cave. It doesn't mean anything to me. Just give me money. That's what I value. That's the words of Ephron. But Abraham recognizes the value of this cave, how holy it is and how special it is. And he wants to bury his beloved Sarah in this cave. And he's willing to part with all his money because it's a priceless purchase that he's making. It's not worth money to him. It has so much greater value than money. So it gives him a huge amount of money, but that's not what's important. It's a priceless object or priceless piece of real estate that he's purchasing, and so the money is not important to him. He gives him the money and he purchases this plot and he buries his wife in this place. And later on he gets buried there. At the end of this week's parsha we learn about the death of Abraham also, and it says that God blessed Abraham with everything, that he had everything he needed. And I think that that's a good wrap up, that we said at the beginning how Sarah was 127, that she lived all her life fully engaged and fully with all her emotions, and almost like transcended time. She was able to take the different time periods of her life and build on them and take them with her into the future and become the Sarah who is our foremother. And Abraham too was also blessed with everything. He had everything he needed. He didn't need more. He had everything he needed. And so too we can learn that lesson. We have everything we we need. And we have the tools to be who we can be. Abraham was Abraham, Sarah was Sarah, and we are each our own light into the world, and we can each put that light into the world, and we can each achieve what we're supposed to achieve because we have what we need. We are also blessed with all. We might feel we're lacking, we might feel we're in pain or we're suffering, but we can learn from Abraham, Sarah, that it's all good and that it's all for the good because it all comes from God, and God's the one in charge, and God's the one that sees the bigger picture, the one who exists outside of time. And we can learn from our foremothers and our foremother and our forefather Abraham and Sarah how to live life fully, how to live our life for what we're willing to die for. What are we willing to die for? And if we can put our finger on that, then that's how we should be living. And then when we get to the end of our days and it's time for us to move on to the next, into the next journey of our souls, because we never end, there's no end to the journey of the soul, that when we are done with this world and we move on into the next world, then we will have left an imprint that continues to ripple out, and the people that we have touched and the people that we have imprinted with who we have been in this world will continue to walk in those ways, and those ways will continue to elevate the world, and we will continue to be in relationship to those people. So we have on some level achieved a level of immortality because what we have cleaved to, what we have done has been good and has been holy, and that's what we're aiming to achieve in our lives. So my blessing to all of us is that we learn from Abraham and Sarah. We learn to value that which we have in life, to live the values that we would die for, to recognize what we have. You know, we learned about Abraham eulogizing and then wailing, and we learned about Isaac who married and then he loved. So to get to that place where we value what we have, where we appreciate it, where we love what we have, that we love what we can be and who we can be in the world, and we continue to put that out, and please God, will elevate the whole world.